Hello, and thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation by the ADA Accommodations Office at Jefferson State Community College about how instructors can support our students with disabilities in their classes. In this presentation, we will provide some background information about what the ADA is, what disabilities are, what accommodations are, how to implement accommodations, and other ways instructors can support students with disabilities. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and all public and private places that are open to the general public. It was amended and expanded in 2008 as well. The ADA is enforced by the Office of Civil Rights. Another law that pertains to individuals with disabilities is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which was the first law focused on civil rights of individuals with disabilities. So if the ADA applies to people with disabilities, what are disabilities? According to the ADA, someone with a disability is identified as an individual who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more life activities. Some examples of conditions that could be substantially limiting are physical conditions such as limited mobility, hearing, visual, or speech, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, learning disabilities, traumatic brain injuries, psychological conditions such as major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and bipolar disorder, and chronic health conditions such as diabetes or epilepsy. So, what does our office actually do? We ensure accessibility. That means that ensuring that students have equal access to participate and benefit from the college's programs and activities. One of the ways that we do this is by verifying students' eligibility for and identifying reasonable and appropriate accommodations. We do this in a three-step process, which I will discuss later. We also assist faculty in understanding how to provide those approved accommodations. This is another important part of what we do because we understand that providing accommodations can be complicated. Our office serves every learner that engages with programs of the college. This includes adult education and GED, dual enrollment, workforce education fast track programs, career and professional programs, and transfer and general studies. In addition to students, we serve the instructors and staff as well as community members. As I said earlier, one of the primary responsibilities of our office is to verify eligibility and determine reasonable and appropriate accommodations to address students' disability-related barriers to accessing academic programs of the college. Accommodations are reasonable and appropriate adjustments or modifications to the tasks, environment, or to the way things are usually done that enable individuals with disabilities to have equal opportunity to participate in academic programs or jobs. Accommodations are individualized based on the student's disability, the documentation they've provided, and how their disability impacts them in the classroom. Accommodations cannot fundamentally alter the curriculum or the essential functions of the course. We often know that some accommodations would be a fundamental alteration and therefore do not approve those requests in advance. However, the college has a lot of different academic programs, and we cannot always know when something would be a fundamental alteration or conflict with an essential function of the course. If an instructor feels that an approved accommodation does fundamentally alter their program, then they should contact our office for assistance. There is a process for evaluating fundamental alterations. A common question we get from students is, I have X disability, what accommodations will I get? And we always tell them that we do not know the answer to that until they have completed the three-step process with our office. And here is that interactive three-step process. The first step is for the student to self-disclose that they are a person with a disability by completing an application for accommodations through the ADA Accommodations portal on our website. The second step is to provide college-level disability documentation that supports their request. We have documentation guidelines that are available on our website, which detail what information should be included. The third step is a virtual intake appointment with our office to discuss their request. At this meeting, we determine what would be reasonable and appropriate accommodations. In this slide, there's a picture titled Equity versus Equality, with three different images shown. The first image shows three individuals at a soccer game behind a fence that obstructs the view of the game. The first individual is the tallest, the second individual is much shorter than the first, and the third individual is using a wheelchair. Each of the individuals is given one box in order to see over the fence. This allows two of the individuals to see over the fence. The tall one can easily see over the fence, and the shorter one can just barely see. However, the third person cannot see over the fence at all because they use a wheelchair. This image is captioned "Same Treatment" because each individual is treated the same by being given the same tool, the box. The second image shows the same individuals at the same game behind the same fence. However, this time, the first individual, the tallest one, is not given a box because they do not need it in order to see over the fence. The second individual is given two boxes so that they can more easily see over the fence than they could with just one box. And the third individual is given a ramp that is high enough for them to be able to see over the fence as well in the wheelchair. This image is captioned "Equitable Treatment" because each individual is given what they need in order to equitably participate in the activity. This is an example of accommodations. The third image shows the same three individuals at the soccer game, but this time the fence has been completely removed. There is no need for boxes or a ramp. This image is captioned "The systemic barrier has been removed. This is equality." When we are able to completely remove a barrier, we should because that benefits everyone, those with disabilities and those without. However, when it is not possible to completely remove a barrier, accommodations are not only necessary, but legally required. So after a student has completed the three-step process and is approved for accommodations, how does the student and the instructor implement the accommodations in the classroom? We like three-step processes, so we describe this process in that way as well. The first step is that the student will request their accommodation letter for the course. This letter details the accommodations the student is approved for and for which class. It does not include confidential information about the student's disability. The purpose of the letter is to let the instructor know what accommodations the student is to receive in their class. The second step is for the instructor to receive the accommodation letter from the student. In most online classes, this is all done electronically through email. Once the instructor has received the accommodation letter, you and the student should discuss how the accommodations will be implemented in your class. We will discuss different types of accommodations and how they can be implemented in the next slide. The third step is for the instructor to, quote, "sign the accommodation letter." If you receive the accommodation letter through the ADA Accommodations portal, you can do this electronically through the portal. If you receive an accommodation letter outside of the portal, either emailed to you as an attachment or given to you in a classroom, you can sign the actual letter. If you do this, retain a copy for yourself, and the student should send a copy of the letter to the ADA Accommodations office to be placed on file. There are 60 standard accommodations, meaning accommodations that have been used and are already established. However, an accommodation may be approved that is not on this standard list. On this slide, we will focus on the most common accommodations. We're going to spend a good bit of time talking about accommodations here. Remember, if you encounter an accommodation that you are unsure how will work in your class, please reach out to our office for assistance. The first set of common accommodations are for testing. Many students need extra time for tests or a distraction-reduced testing environment in order to mitigate how their disability impacts them. In an online class, it is usually up to the student to set up their testing environment at home in a way that is conducive to them, so the distraction-reduced testing accommodation may not be needed in those situations. However, if the test is taking place on campus, then the instructor is responsible for identifying an environment where the student can test that is distraction-reduced. This may be an empty classroom across the hall or with another faculty or staff member that can proctor the test. For extended time on tests, if the tests are taken online at home, then the instructor should ensure that the allotted time for that student has been extended prior to the start of the test. If the test is in person, then you may need to coordinate with the student to arrive early or stay late in order for them to have their full extended time. In an online live instruction course, you may have to adjust how you would typically conduct your tests. For example, if you typically conduct your exam during the first 30 minutes of the class and then start your lecture, you may need to move your test to the end of the class if the student or you are unable to have them start the test earlier. This accommodation applies for any timed quiz, test, or exam. The next section of accommodations are classroom accommodations. The first is note-taking assistance and recording of lectures. We typically start with recording of lectures before going directly to note-taking assistance, unless it is clearly evident that the student will need note-taking assistance. We encourage recording of lectures because it allows students to review the class information exactly as it was presented. This helps them to supplement their notes, refresh what they learned, and catch things they may have missed the first time. Many of the fast track classes are already recorded, so this accommodation is kind of built in already. If a student has note-taking assistance as an accommodation, we encourage the student and the instructor to determine what would be the most effective way for the student to receive supplements to their own notes. This may be the recorded lectures. This may be having copies of PowerPoints in advance of lectures. This may be receiving copies of another student's notes. If that is the method used, the instructor should identify a student in class that takes good notes. You can ask for volunteers from the course or ask someone directly. You can just say that you need a copy of a student's notes. You do not need to say why. After you receive the student's notes, you can then provide them to the student with the accommodation. This is not always the best way to implement this accommodation. It will really depend on the student and your course. The next classroom accommodation is absences and makeup work. A disability is a physical or mental impairment that is substantially limiting to one or more life activities. As such, some disabilities will, at times, impact a student's class attendance. When necessary to ensure equal access to the college's academic programs, an accommodation for reasonable disability-related absences will be approved. The student is expected to notify the instructor as soon as possible when they will be absent due to their disability. The student is not expected to provide a doctor's excuse for absences. The reasonability of the number of absences will vary depending on the class requirements. This will also mean that from time to time, students may be unable to submit assignments or take exams on time. When that happens, they should be allowed to make up the work. The student is expected to notify the instructor as soon as possible when they're unable to complete an assignment or take a special exam due to their disability. The student is not expected to provide a doctor's excuse in this situation either. The reasonability of making up work or exams will vary depending on the class and the student's disability. Instructors are expected to work with their students to ensure that they have the opportunity to make up work and exams missed due to their disability, and students are expected to work with their instructors to ensure that work and exams are made up in a reasonable time frame. The next classroom accommodation is sign language and closed captions. Students that are deaf or hard of hearing will need communication accommodations based on how they communicate. If their primary communication method is sign language, the ADA office will hire a sign language interpreter that will attend class with them to translate. If the class is online, the interpreter will also attend virtually. Our office will work with the instructor, workforce education staff, and the interpreter to ensure they get online. Closed captions are a part of universal design and are required for any video that is used for instruction. Additionally, some deaf and hard of hearing students use real-time captioning. This is another service that the ADA Accommodations Office will arrange if the student needs this accommodation. Alternate format for text typically applies to students with visual impairments or reading disabilities. It can be digital copies of text so that they can be enlarged, or a screen reader can be used. It can be audiobooks, which the ADA office will arrange if necessary. It can be large print for handouts and exams, or it could be Braille. If a student has this accommodation, speak to them about what they need and how you can provide it. Typically, digital copies are sufficient. The last common accommodations are for brief breaks and permission to sit and stand. These are sort of self-explanatory, but just know that the student has permission for these accommodations. You may speak with them about how they can utilize these accommodations without being a disturbance to the other students. Sometimes these accommodations are accompanied by preferential seating so that the student can sit near a door in the event they need to excuse themselves. There are several things instructors can do to support students with disabilities. The first is to embrace universal design. Some easy methods for universal design are to provide lecture slides, notes, and recordings that are closed captioned. You can provide clear, concise directions using numbers or bullet points. You can use high contrast and resizable text. You can summarize the key points of your lecture. Chances are that if it accommodates a student with a disability, then it will probably benefit all students as well. Think of ways to remove that fence when possible. Next is to understand classroom accommodations. Hopefully, after watching this video, you have a better understanding of that. We should all confront bias, ableism, and discrimination, but as an instructor and a professional in your career field, you have influence and authority, so it is particularly important that you address these disability-related issues. And lastly, you should expect the same performance from students with disabilities that you expect from any other student. We want our students to be prepared for the workforce when they complete our programs. We want them to have demonstrated their knowledge and abilities. We put accommodations in place to address barriers to accessibility caused by their disabilities, but we do not minimize the learning outcomes that all students are to achieve. Doing that would be a disservice to them and to their future employers. We have a guide to teaching students with disabilities that is available on our website, www.jeffersonstate.edu/ADA, or you can scan the QR code here. Thank you for your time and attention. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You may also complete a brief survey to provide feedback on this presentation by scanning the QR code or going to the link listed on the screen.